John Carver, Darren Derflinger, and Shannon Miller are from Van Meter School System. We have 2 mics. They'll share them. They're a panel. I'm thinking you're going to be blown away with what they've done with Twitter at Van Meter Schools. Have at it, guys.
Thank you. Well, there's another mic back there, Shannon. I'm John Carver. I'm the superintendent of schools in Van Meter. Darren Derflinger is our secondary principal, grades 6 through 12. And Shannon Miller is our district librarian. And what we're going to share with you today is some of the things that we've been doing as far as social media. And how many of you, I'm just curious, have been following hashtag Van Meter? Outstanding, outstanding. So, Darren, I think you're going to kick it off.
Well, as John said, we're in Van Meter, which some of you probably are wondering where Van Meter is even at. Van Meter is west of Des Moines, approximately 10 miles of West Des Moines, just off Interstate 80. Small school district. We have about 630 kids K-12, and we're all in one building. So we're unique. We are 10 minutes from Waukee. Waukee has more kindergartners this year than we have in our entire district. So when we think of what we need to do to kind of create this niche for our district, we started talking about creating a brand. Twitter helped greatly in that process. No, that's fine. It's good. Yeah. Twitter. When you think of Twitter, most people think of Shaquille O'Neal or some of those athletes and how they've used Twitter to kind of give it a bad name, and it's unfortunate. And because we were kind of reaping the benefits as a district. I was first exposed to Twitter by Scott McLeod. For those of you that are involved in education, and I see Angela here, so I know she knows Scott well. Scott was or is currently, he's actually going to go to Kentucky, but he's actually currently a professor at Iowa State University. And he's worked really hard to get administrators like John and I involved in using technology to enhance learning for students. He exposed me to it a little bit over, it's about 2 years ago. I had no idea what it was as far as how I could use it for education. But that exposure led me to kind of mess around with it. Couldn't figure it out. Didn't make any sense to me. So I stopped using it for a while. And then I was actually in a class working on enhancing my own education board. Decided to get on Twitter and just start messing around with it. That led me to connecting with some other educators, namely a guy named Eric Schiniger, who's a principal in New Milford High School in New Jersey. And what intrigued me about it is, one, he was a principal. His hashtag was NMHS_principal. So I knew I had some similarities to him. So I just sent him a direct message and said, hey, how are you using Twitter? That led to Skype conversations. And then that led me to going to John, who is, in my opinion, a master at networking in a room. He'll know everybody's name in here before he leaves. He won't know how to say it. But he'll know your name. Sorry about that, John. So I introduced John to Twitter, and I said, hey, I think this is a great tool for you to start thinking about using. I started talking to Shannon about it, and Shannon's like, well, I'm already using it. So we just thought, it's something that we could use as a district to connect with other learners. One way in education that Twitter is used, there's a hashtag called EdChat. And EdChat was started by Tom Whitby, Steven Anderson, and Shelley Terrell. Tom is in New York, Shelley is in Germany, and Steven Anderson is in North Carolina. And they created this hashtag to start formulating a conversation about education. And they send out, I think it's probably become more organized as it's evolved, but basically they'll send out a survey early in the week or at the end of the week. EdChat runs on Tuesdays. And they'll send out a survey asking, hey, what do you guys want to talk about? Namely, a lot of times it's about changing education. We've heard a lot about how agriculture business needs to change. Education obviously is no different. So through EdChat, we start learning about this concept of a personal learning network, which, for Angela Myers is sitting here in the crowd, she's somebody that talks about that a lot. And that really is you as an individual being able to control your own learning. And that's where Twitter has helped us. So how did we come up with this hashtag? What was the reason for it? John had made some connections politically with different local legislatures, and they'd asked us to come and talk to the House Senate Education Appropriation Committee, and this would have been January of 2010. And they asked us to come speak about some of the things we're doing at our school to try to change public education. We took 6 or 7 students with us. They gave a great presentation because they actually did most of the talking. It was really cool. But prior to that, we wanted to come up. We wanted to get more people involved in the conversation. We knew about EdChat. We knew how many people were using that tool. So we decided to create our own hashtag #VanMeter. Sent that out. Started connecting with some people. Encouraged other educators on EdChat to use that hashtag while we were presenting. The day we presented, I think we presented for about an hour. We had over 1,000 tweets used during that hour presentation using the VanMeter hashtag. And this is when we just started like a day before it, I believe. So that led us to, okay, what more can we do with this? So Tom Whitby, who I talked about earlier, the creator of EdChat, or one of the creators of EdChat, had suggested at different times, you could come up with your own hashtag. So we had our own hashtag to start formulating your own conversation about what's going on in your school. And we're going to do this. We're not to this point yet. He even challenges schools to, have flat screen TVs out throughout the building and just kind of have a constant conversation about what's going on in your school. And it's one thing for us 3 to use it, but what's starting to happen, and Shannon will touch on this a little bit later with the class she's teaching, we have students using it regularly, talking about what they're doing in school. We try to be as, you hear about the term transparency. Well, that's what we want our kids to do. We want them to share about what's going on in the classroom. So if I'm a parent and, my kid's tweeting out that, I'm doing this in class, hopefully that will encourage our parents to also ask more questions to get more involved in the school. We all use TweetDeck quite a bit, but we've actually put our Twitter feed within our website. So if you go to vmbulldogs.com, that's our school webpage, the Twitter feed with whatever's being said about VanMeter will be going through there. You'll see tweets from people throughout the world, but you'll also see tweets from students at VanMeter. So that's kind of a little bit of an introduction about it. I'm going to turn it over to John, I think, next. And John will talk a little more about building relationships.
Well, I tell you, the thing that has been very exciting about using Twitter is that, as we've heard spoken today on in the agricultural world, building relationships, education is changing. And we're trying to use Twitter to create new relationships. 3 years ago, before we had even heard of Twitter, education learning only occurred within the walls of VanMeter School. Now, because we are utilizing Twitter, I think between the 3 of us here, I think we've got something like 15,000 followers globally, educators around the world. And I heard earlier today that Twitter is the means by which you meet people, which we're getting pretty good at. And then after meeting folks, then we take it to the next level. It is not unusual for students in VanMeter to have authors Skyping in, scientists Skyping in, and the learning environment is actually no longer just at VanMeter, but it is across the state, across the nation, and globally. Darren mentioned about our own personal learning networks. Presently, I'm got a PLN through Twitter of about 35 different superintendents from across the United States. And before Twitter, I would have never known these ladies and gentlemen, and now we communicate almost on a daily basis, the sharing of ideas. And if you stop and think about it, now this new modality of sharing ideas, it takes thinking to a whole different level. 1 minute? Shannon was going to kick me because she wasn't going to get to talk and stuff. That's fine. But no, as I said, because we're sharing ideas, thinking is going to a whole different level. And one of the things that we talk about is at VanMeter, we are a small rural Iowa school district. But I would tell you the kids in VanMeter are getting the same, they're getting a world-class educational experience. And that we're connecting our learners, and we're moving away from teachers and students to learners. But one of the things that we're doing is we're connecting our learners globally. And some of the things that Shannon will talk about, but some of the things I've got to lift up is that through Twitter, we were able to meet Bill Brannick, who's the principal at Bonner Prendergast High School in Philadelphia. It's a large 4A school in Philadelphia, through Twitter. And we've created a relationship with the kids there. Now, Philadelphia is a lot different than Van Meter. And Shannon will share a little bit more, but we've got a PLN class where Bill and Shannon are teaching students. The students are learning together, kids from Philadelphia and kids from Van Meter. Last Saturday, I got to share this with you. Last Saturday, through Twitter, we were connected with the nerdy teacher who's on Twitter. It's Nick. Nick, I'm sorry for this. Nick, the nerdy teacher. Okay, we're in Van Meter. Nick is he is an educator at Grosse Pointe, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. Okay, a lot different than Van Meter. And so what the ninth graders in Van Meter and Nick's ninth graders have been working on for the last month is a Shakespearean play in which the kids in Van Meter did an act, the kids at Grosse Pointe did an act, they each did an act. It was Romeo and Juliet, and then they put it all together for a film. And so the Romeo in Van Meter looked a little different than the Romeo at Grosse Pointe, but yet it was still the same storyline. And again, that connection wouldn't have been made if it hadn't been by Twitter.
I've got to add on there a little bit too, John. Just so you understand, they were reading Romeo and Juliet, but they did all this acting and putting it together and writing it out because they did like their own modern version on their own time. We had kids showing up at 7 o'clock in the morning and staying until 5 o'clock at night. We had kids coming out of study hall, coming out of their advisory period. It wasn't a case of where this was kind of a teacher-led thing that, hey, this is what you have to do. Student-led. It was totally student-led. They controlled it all, which is a lot different than what most of our learning has been about.
Well, and one last thing. Through Twitter, we were connected with Lime Dunphy at St. Augustine's College in Sydney, Australia. And we've connected our fifth graders with his fifth graders there. And that's like a 17-hour difference. So when it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Van Meter, it's 8 o'clock in the morning in Sydney. And so the students in Van Meter have been staying late, and the kids in Sydney have been going early and having Skype conversations so that they can learn from one another. But through Twitter, we have taken teaching and learning. It's going to a whole different level. New types of relationships. Shan.
As Shannon gets ready here, how many of you guys have heard of the Grammys or the Oscars? Okay, how many of you have heard of the Shorty Awards? All right. Well, if you didn't know this, Shannon this year was recognized with a Shorty Award, which is basically the equivalent of a Grammy or an Oscar for Twitter. She actually, received the I don't know, trophy, I guess I would call it, here just a couple weeks ago. So she was the only educator that received an award. So she's somebody that if you're not following her on Twitter and you have kids or you have an interest in education, if you're not following her, you're doing yourself a disservice because you need to follow her on Twitter. So go ahead.
Thanks, Darren. Okay, so I'm Shannon Miller, and I am the teacher librarian at Van Meter. This is my 4th year here. As the guys said, a couple years ago, we started on Twitter, and Darren was new to the district, and we had just, kind of met. And so it was also a really good way for us, I think, to create this relationship that just kicked off the fall of 2009. And if I look back now and could tell you everything that has happened, it just blows my mind, because it has changed my life and the life for all of our kids, and I think school community at Van Meter. But some of the things that I just kind of wanted to talk about were the ways that we have gotten connected. First, it kind of started on a personal level, getting connected to people like Tom and Steve Anderson, Kyle Pace, Beth Still, all these people that we built our PLN first and made it really strong to try to get, the word out and reach out to them and see what they did and the things that they were doing in their schools. And it brought a lot of opportunities to us. We presented in Nashville together. We went to ISTE last summer. I went to NT Camp in Philadelphia. And through all those connections, when they got to be face-to-face, was really when things started to connect, because that's when Nick and I met at Philly, and I was able to take Nick back into a Skype conversation when I got to Van Meter with Sean Heyer and started planning Romeo and Juliet. It's when I went to Philadelphia, and Bill Brannick and I started talking about the class that we were going to have that we entitled Web 2.0 PLN, where we were going to connect his kids and our kids and build their own PLN and teach them how to use social media. And so through all of these connections first, just through us on Twitter, it got us connected to our kids, which really, last year we were kind of getting started, and the kids would come more to us and ask us, like, so what are you doing, Mrs. Miller, in the library when you're tweeting, and what are you tweeting about? And so I would show them, and they knew especially that Darren and I were connected, and we had a couple kids especially that came last year. One of them, Meg, she's really interested in photography, and so I taught her how to use Twitter, and she got connected to some photographers, got some gigs, and had, really developed her passion into something that she could develop into a business someday. Zach is another one that we helped him connect with different music people because he wants to develop a music venue company. And so from there, this year, it really kicked into gear that not just our kids in high school, but all of our kids K-12 are connecting with people through Skype, using Twitter. Classes might have their own hashtag if we're doing a project or something. There's one of my friends in New Hampshire, his class has a tweet, I think it's Mr. G's class, that they send me the weather every day, and we connect with our fourth graders here and his fourth graders. Last Friday, our kids, they did a wax museum the day before. And so they all dress up like a dead person and have this huge production. And so I said, hey, Steve, do you want to, watch the production? The time was kind of off, and nothing really jived with our schedule. And so then I thought, well, I'll just ask him. Maybe he wants to stay after school, and his kids want to stay after school. We had 17 of his kids stay after school. And as I watched our kids perform over Skype, we had 17 of their parents filtering into that room to also watch. That's pretty powerful for not just their learning experience, but those kids, the way that they can stand up there and our kids can communicate well, and the way that they have confidence, and they're using this, safely and wisely to make connections for their education, which I think is a really important thing for us to do for our kids. Another thing that I did that has connected, like they said, about the authors and our kids, just reaching out to like experts and talking to people. I developed a brand for our library a couple years ago, and it's just called the Van Meter Voice. And the voice being behind that everybody needs to, have their own voice, and these kids need to have a platform, and a place that's not just in the four walls of the library, but within our school and globally. And so our kids use that a lot, use our blog a lot, use the Facebook a lot. We have our own Twitter. And that has brought so many opportunities to the kids that, Darren's daughter is in 6th grade. And Emma last year, she asked her mom and dad if she could start a blog. And pretty soon she was Skyping with me that night. And we were setting up her blog. And now she loves to blog. She has set up another one. We started this Club Click this year, hashtag Club Click, that you guys can all follow. And I haven't even told you guys this, but this weekend it came Club Click Unleashed. And so it's not just going to be in Van Meter anymore, but it's going to be globally. And so we've started a Google Doc and invited anybody that wants to join, to join our kids in this photography club that, Emma and I basically one day started out as a conversation with one of my friends in New York. And now it's going to become, something that anybody can follow, and that has a lot of power for, even kids that are in 6th grade or adults that are retired or teachers. And so it has a lot of power. So Twitter has definitely changed my life, the life of the kids, and I can't wait to see where it takes us.
One of the other things with Twitter, we called off school via Twitter. We had snow days and late starts. I would put it out on Twitter so the kids could see that as well too. But, a common theme between what we've heard today and now is that relationships are changing. And through social media and Twitter, we're making new connections. I think, Darren, you got to...
Yeah, I was just actually, I think we're asked the question, why Twitter? Why are you having your kids use Twitter or blogging or any of those types of social media tools? And I think as an educator, obviously we want our kids to be able to communicate in multiple platforms, but where else would you want kids to learn about using those tools other than school? You know, so it's the safest environment to teach them the appropriate way to use the media that's available to them. And we know that's going to change, but we also know that our kids have been exposed to things in a safe environment that most kids are not exposed to, and it's unfortunate for them in that regard, meaning the other students, but for our kids, we really like the advantage that they're able to have as far as education is concerned. So we thank you for your time.